We talk all things ABS challenge system. You can challenge balls and strikes. What does it mean for baseball? We talk about it, and then we ask a catcher who has lived it. Garrett Stubbs joins the show.
Hello and welcome to Baseball Barbacast, the only baseball podcast in the world that watched the gold medal hockey game and said, baseball should do something like this. I'm Jake Mintz. That's Jordan Shusterman. What do you think, like an international competition between different countries on a grand stage? Who says no?
Are you saying a USA-Canada WBC championship? What a plot twist that would be. That's going to take some serious heroics from the Naylor brothers and whoever is pitching for Team Canada. Good morning, my friend. It is Monday, not Tuesday. Oh my goodness, we're back. This is how you know baseball season is almost here. The 3 days a week baseball barbacast schedule has returned Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which means we do not have to wait an extra day to do an entire podcast about gold medalist Tage Thompson. Just kidding. We are going to keep our focus on the baseball field in this episode as we talk about a pretty important part of the season, my friend. Baseball is changing once again, for better, for worse. I think for better, but we are going to talk all about the ABS challenge system. That is our opener.
Baseball tends to change slowly over time. Like actual evolution, the differences in the sport as the years pass by cannot be seen in the here and the now. Those strikeout rates have skyrocketed over the last 50 years. If you watched any single game or any single season, you might not be able to tell. ABS, automatic ball strike, is a completely different can of worms. The so-called robo-ump, the so-called, whatever you want to call it, challenge system, whatever, is going to dramatically reconfigure the way that we consume the sport. It is here in 2026 for the first time in Major League Baseball games during the regular season. And we are going to dedicate an entire episode to trying to explain, preview, analyze what this is going to be. In a little bit, you will hear an interview we did with Garrett Stubbs, a catcher with the Philadelphia Phillies. Why Garrett Stubbs? A couple of reasons. One, he's a good talker. Two, he spent a lot of last year in AAA, where the ABS system was in use for the entirety of the season. He's going to give a catcher's perspective into how he thinks this is going to go. But who cares what a big league catcher thinks? I care what Jordan Shusterman thinks.
That's why we get to talk first. We put Garrett in the B block. We are the A block hosts. And so we are going to set the stage here for this ABS challenge system discussion. So how did we get here? I think we should do that. We'll get to what is now being implemented in a second. But this, in some respects, feels like a long time coming. In some respects, you'd be like, well, wait a minute. This has all happened kind of quickly. I mean, the concept of replay in and of itself is relatively recent in the grand scheme of baseball history. First introduced in 2008. There was about a 6 or 7 season period where umpires could initiate reviews. And then in 2014, we get the opportunity for major league managers to say, hey, that call was wrong. We got to do something about that. Can you go check that on the video? And we know replay has expanded to a very large part of our baseball watching experience, for better or for worse. However, then 2019, we realized, well, hold on a second. We live in the future. We can review everything, including potentially balls and strikes. So in 2019, using some of the ball tracking technology that starts to kind of become pervasive across many levels of major league of baseball, we should just say, we start testing the automatic ball strike system in the Atlantic League, an independent league, partner league with MLB, where it was like, all right, well, this is, low stakes for these indie ballers. Let's just try out this new technology and see if we can have a robot call balls and strikes and have the calls, transmitted to umpires via earpiece, and then they will call the strikes. Okay, wow, all right, this is pretty extreme. And I remember 2019, we're like, this is unbelievable. It could be years and years before we see this in Major League Baseball, or some people saying we'll never see this in Major League Baseball. This is crazy. Well, A couple years later, we see it more in MLB affiliated leagues. We see it in the Arizona Fall League in 2021. We see it in 5 AAA stadiums in 2022. In 2023 and 2024, we see it in all AAA stadiums. Now, it's also important that this is where we also get a distinction between full ABS, which is this system, the automated strike zone, is calling every single pitch, and the introduction of the challenge system, which is, of course, where we ended up, which is the opportunity for teams a certain number of times per game to say, hey, I think that was wrong. Can you check the system? The umpires are calling most of the balls and strikes, but in certain opportunities, you can challenge them. In the middle of 2024, after significant kind of surveys with both fans and the players, using the system at AAA, they decided, you know what, this whole full ABS thing where the robots are calling everything, this is not working. Nobody likes this. Fans don't really like this. Players certainly don't like this. Let's just focus on the challenge system. Entering 2025, we really focus on testing the challenge system as it is brought to Major League Spring Training. It is brought to, of course, it is instituted for the entire season in AAA with just the challenge system. And then we even see it in the MLB All-Star Game as well. And then at the end of the season last year, it is announced this is what is coming. The ABS challenge system will be in Major League Baseball in the regular season and postseason in 2026. And so now we've had a few months to start to wrap our heads around what that means, what it will look like, what we are excited about, what we are nervous about, what we are worried about, and so many other things that we probably are not even thinking about yet. But this episode, this conversation, this interview with Garrett Stubbs is going to be an initial attempt to kind of get at all of those topics. So, Jake, I know you wanted to, before we get any further, like, what is the point of this? That is how we got here. But as MLB has communicated this introduction of this system, how have they gone about describing in simple terms what the goal of this is?
So, yeah, you just described the how, like the how we got here. We're going to do the what in terms of what this actually is. But I do think the why is the through line to this and is important to remember as we have bumps that will come about as the system is implemented. This is from MLB. Okay, I'm reading something that MLB sent around to reporters as kind of an ABS explainer. Objective: provide players with an opportunity to correct missed calls in high leverage moments in a manner that fans like. Right? An opportunity to correct missed calls in high leverage moments in a manner that fans like. And I think high leverage moments is important because what we don't want, and what I at least don't want, is for there to be unlimited challenges and for this to happen 5 times an inning. Each team will only start with 2 challenges, right? And that means it will not necessarily be as omnipresent as some people might fear. I think that's a good thing, just because you don't want it to completely ruin the flow of the sport. And more than anything else, what I don't want, and why the phrase high leverage moments kind of hits with me, is people complaining about balls and strikes in October, because it is just not interesting, frankly, to talk about, to recap, to spend time griping about, because bad calls happen. And if we as a baseball society have the technology to mitigate and limit that, like, why wouldn't we do that, right? And so I do think it is just important to remember that is the objective. Now, in a manner that fans like, what does that part of the sentence mean? That means that if this is entertainment, right? The truth is in some ways secondary to how compelling the game action is. And I think that is something that MLB has kind of realized over the last 10 years, is that, like, we are an entertainment business and we will take the necessary steps to make the product better. And I think that this will, as constructed, will make the product better.
And how it's presented is how entertaining it ends up being. And we can talk about what it has actually looked like. We've, of course, just had a weekend of spring training games. We had it in spring training last year, but now, because it is they have have the system now in every single spring training ballpark, which is not the case last year, more fans are being exposed to this a lot more quickly than they were a year ago. And then obviously knowing that it is actually coming, I think more fans are paying attention to what this is going to look like. The one thing I just want to hit on again with this objective, this mission statement from MLB is it is still to me, the high leverage moments is important, but it's the word opportunity, right? Because it is not a guarantee. And I agree with your point that when we get to the postseason, yes, in theory, it would be great if we know for sure that when the ump blows a call in the biggest spot in, NLCS Game 6, that team has a challenge left and uses it. Very possible that's what happens. It's also very possible that they won't have a challenge left, and we will still have situations where that is the case, which brings us to the strategy. I mean, we're jumping ahead a little bit, but that is also part of this, and also part of the entertainment, and also part of just how we think about the game. It gives us another human element, which is, I think, what is most fun of this whole thing, is that for all of the discourse about how this is removing a crucial human element of the game, it is also introducing a whole new category of human elements as it interplays with this new system. And that is what I think, most excited about. We can kind of get into some of those as we get there. But I think we should describe how the system works before we go any farther.
Yeah. Let's do the rules. You get 2 challenges. The only people that can challenge are the batter, the pitcher, and the catcher. If they would like to challenge, they must tap the top of their head, whether that be batting helmet, catching helmet, or hat. Give it a little tap. We've seen a number of different tap styles so far in spring training. I saw Henry Davis go only with the fingers, kind of like jazz hands on the top. Most people are using the palm. And then what I saw, I think I believe it was Edgar Caro, framed the pitch, went right to the head with the glove hand, with the ball in it, and just banged his head with the glove. So we're going to have a bunch of different styles, but you got to tap the top of your head. You cannot receive help. We say, hey, look, if you need it, ask for help. Not in this situation. Okay. No help. All right. No help at all.
It's on you.
It's on you. From the bench, from the fielders, from the runners, from the fans. And if it looks like you're getting outside help, you're cheating on the exam, the ump will say, no challenge, not allowed. That scenario is 100,000% going to happen at some point. We will talk about that. There are a lot of specifics about, when runners move, how the challenges affect. We're not going to get into that. That will come up on a case-by-case basis. Let's just kind of back pocket that for now. Now, what does the zone actually look like, right? Because if we are defining a set zone, the zone is going to be different for Jose Altuve than it is for Aaron Judge. Jordan, let's walk everybody through the specific parameters of the zone.
One other thing I just want to make very clear, because you didn't say it. If you are correct with your challenge, you keep it. That is very important. You could, in theory, challenge infinitely if you keep getting it right. And you will hear an example from Garrett later on in this episode where there have been situations at the AAA level where, an ump is having a really bad day and it basically spirals to the point where they're getting challenged all the time and they are constantly being overturned. That is much less likely to happen at the major league level for a few reasons, because, again, the stakes are higher. And I think no matter what the scenario is, players are going to be a little bit more, cautious with how quickly they're pulling the trigger. And the umps are better, of course. That said, it is possible, right? And one of my biggest questions is just, what is the most successful challenges we see in one game for one team? What is the worst? Because we have our ump scorecards. We've seen this tracking of how many calls they quote unquote missed. Now it's going to be a much different way for us to see that, because as we know, the most a team can get wrong in a game is 2. I mean, I guess it's slightly more than that. If it goes to extra innings, you get an additional challenge, whatever. But in theory, an umpire could be wrong and corrected over and over and over and over if the teams kept getting it right. So I just want to make sure we have that. But okay, so what is the zone?
Dude,
what is this strike zone?
Such a funny scenario.
It's possible. We'll see. I don't know what the max is going to be, but it is certainly something that I've been thinking about. Okay, so what is this strike zone? Because as we know, there have been many ways that the strike zone has been presented to us via technology since, the broadcasts have become more advanced, since the game day app has become a thing, since StatCast has become a thing, whatever. So what is the zone that is being tracked using the Hawkeye cameras that are now in every ballpark, which is essentially an even upgraded version of the TrackMan ball tracking system that has, of course, become very standard across all levels of baseball. Hawkeye is essentially the top level version of that technology, and that is what is tracking the zone. So how wide is the strike zone? It's the width of the plate, 17 inches. Now, you might say, well, okay, well, that of course, is the width of the plate. When they first started testing this, it was actually, I believe, an inch or two wider than the plate because, again, they were starting with a bigger buffer zone and trying to treat it more like the human element, keep it up. But no, needs exactly these 17 inches, the width of the plate. How tall is the strike zone? This is probably the most interesting part of it. The bottom of the zone will be 27% of the batter's height. The top of the zone, 53.5% of the batter's height, which means they are measuring all of the players to make sure they know how tall they are. That is how I saw it multiple times in spring training in Arizona, where I walked in and everyone was in a line getting measured like that by official MLB people. No longer can you go in there and say, I'm actually this tall. I'm actually this tall. Now, the irony of that is that in this case, you would be incentivized to lie about being shorter if you were given the opportunity, because that would mean your zone would, of course, be smaller.
Could you go to Turkey? Yeah. You go to Turkey, you get some bones out, you come back, you get your height measured, you go back to Turkey, you get those bones put back in, and then you're cooking with gas.
Wow. A lot of people are like, what are you talking about? But I'm not going to give you the opportunity to explain further what you're referencing.
Leg lengthening surgery.
Yeah, no, I'm aware. I know, but you really just threw that around super casually. But I assume that is not what's happening. I don't think any players are taking advantage of that terrifyingly disturbing opportunity.
So one thing, dude, and please correct me if I'm wrong. The depth of the strike zone is different than it has always been. So maybe I'm incorrect, but growing up, I was told and assumed that the strike zone was the front of the plate, that when the pitch crossed the front of the plate, that is where it was evaluated. And with this new set of rules, that is now the middle of the plate. And I think that is an important factor and a very smart detail by whoever came up with this. Because why was the front of the strike zone, or why was like the strike zone measured at the front of the plate? Because batters used to stand like in the middle of the plate, right? Now, because everyone throws 100 miles an hour, dudes are standing as far away as possible. Right.
Yeah.
And so I do think that is a legitimate shift.
And it's also an important distinction. You have to think about it as a two-dimensional, is often described as like a sheet of glass over that middle part of the plate, as opposed to this box that if the ball at any point kind of touches this three-dimensional box, that's strike. No, it has to hit that kind of invisible pane, right? That invisible box, which is, as you mentioned, placed half at middle of the plate, not at the front of the plate. And that is important because I remember a lot of discussions from people who were dealing with the system earlier on, that you would have a lot of situations where balls, particularly at the bottom of the zone, were maybe clipping the bottom of the zone in front of the plate, and it was so rarely even remotely looking like a strike. And I think that this also combats those kinds of pitches from a visual aesthetic. So I think that makes a lot of sense. But again, the most important part here is really the height, because it is entirely dependent on the batter's height, but not dependent on the batter's stance. And some batters are a lot more notably dramatic crouchers or upright than others, which is going to make certain calls to certain hitters probably going to stand out.
However, it is important to remember that whether you are Cody Bellinger, who is more upright than anyone, or Jose Altuve, who is about as crouched as it gets. I mean, let's use Jeff Bagwell as an example, right? The ultimate croucher. Mm-hmm. Most of these hitters are generally getting to the same place in their swing, right? They are getting to front foot down, back knee bent, front leg straight, arms loaded. Like they're Jose Altuve is not making contact in a crouched position, and Cody Bellinger is not necessarily making contact in an upright position. Now, Bellinger is probably more upright than Altuve, whatever. What this is probably going to do is the players that like start crouched and then like take a pitch without really getting into their load, that's going to look super weird. Like we're going to have one where it's like a 3-0 count and Altuve is crouching and it's like up by his neck and it's a strike, you know? And it is just important to remember that it is not your stance, it is your height.
Well, to be clear, this is an important distinction there. You might be right that could happen, but the ump can still call it whatever he wants to call it.
Sure.
But this is the part. It's about whether this is why it's going to be about the players learning their own zones all over, right? Or learning what the zone is within the context of being able to challenge. And that is an important distinction because
hitters how tall they are when they get up to the plate. You imagine like Cal Raleigh's behind the dish, Altuve. How tall are you actually?
No, well, you joke that, but like that's part of it's part of the scouting report. Because if I know that this lineup is entirely guys 6'3" or taller, or I know that this guy's small, I have a better sense of where the zone is. Now, again, you're still all thinking about it in the context of whether or not someone challenges because the umpire is still calling the zone as he sees it. But this also is going to influence in both directions because at some point, the umpire is also going to try and be calling what he knows the zone is now being judged as in the case of the player challenging it. So it kind of goes both ways. But I do think that we often, in talking about this, kind of jump past the part where there still is a challenge that has to occur. It is not just a zone that is changing all the time. It is something that is going to slowly be revealed in the scenarios where Aaron Judge challenges and is right, or Aaron Judge challenges and is wrong. Like, or a catcher facing Aaron Judge challenges and is right or wrong. That is where we are going to actually learn and understand the kind of intricacies and differences between the sizes of the strike zone.
And Garrett talks about this a little bit later. But if you're part of the reason that people think framing is going to survive is because you're still trying to steal the strike, right? You're still trying to make the umpire think a ball's a strike, and you're still really, more important than anything, trying to convince the hitter that a ball's a strike, right? So if you present the pitch well to the hitter, they are less likely to challenge the pitch, and therefore it is less likely, it cannot be overturned if it is not challenged. And so it just kind of changes, I think, a little bit who you're presenting the pitch for. And I'm curious to see if, I mean, someone who knows way more about catching could speak to this. Like, if you're framing for the hitter, are you doing different movements than if you're framing for the umpire? Like, obviously, you're still framing for the umpire as well, but like that equation changes a little bit now.
A little bit. I do think that not all hitters are noticing where the ball is caught, but it is something that I've heard hitters talk about. And so I think that can be a factor, but it's a great point. It's a great point. It just changes the opportunities for framing. But also there will be ones where the most basic one is a catcher tries to frame something. He fools the ump, the hitter's not fooled, and you get it fixed. You know, like that's also, which is kind of a version of exactly why this exists and what some people, I think some fans are maybe looking forward to, at least the ones that do not necessarily like framing to the same degree. Now, I think another thing that we want to get to, so we've kind of given you the rules and given you, what the zone is. I do want to talk about a little bit of the data that we do have as we start to think about what this is going to look like, how this is going to function. And something that is very straightforward that I think is important is to understand is, okay, well, so they've been doing this in AAA. How often are the players right? And incredibly, in AAA last year, the overturn rate for all challenges in AAA last year was 50%. Okay, so this is important because you might think, oh man, think of all the calls they're correcting finally, where if it's like, no, it's the umps are pretty good and the players aren't necessarily that good at challenging it. But there are also some interesting splits in terms of who is challenging it. And if you look at the data from spring training of last season, we can talk about why I think the spring training data isn't necessarily going to be perfectly representative of our major league experience. It was a 52% overturn rate, so a little bit better among the major leaguers. But I'm most interested in the split, which is that the success rates between catchers, hitters, and pitchers. Catchers had a 56% success rate when challenging. Hitters, 50%. Perfect coin flip. Pitchers, 41% success rate. So this gets at another most basic element, which is probably the most standard line of questioning from reporters in spring training right now to team personnel, to players, to managers, to coaching staffs, which is who is going to be allowed to challenge. As teams are preparing to put this into in-game strategy, a big part of this is not only when are you challenging from a leverage standpoint, and Garrett will talk a little bit about that later, but who in particular has the leeway. Because if you only have 2 a game to burn to get wrong, you better all be on the same page about who and when is appropriate to be tapped in the head.
And I do think that if I was running a team, pitchers are not allowed to do this. It's just not worth it. And I believe the Brewers, Pat Murphy has already come out and said this, like our pitchers are not allowed to challenge. Because if there's no way a pitcher on any given pitch will have a better understanding of where it was than the pitcher's own catcher, right?
Correct. Literally impossible.
It's that simple. That's that simple. You're the second most qualified person in the relationship to make this challenge. Therefore, I am taking it completely out of your hands every time. Now, if we have, I don't know, like Justin Verlander is pitching to a rookie catcher, maybe it's a little bit different, but I think that is an outlier more than anything that's I think by the middle of the season, pitcher challenges are going to be very rare for pitchers under like 8 years of service time.
Yeah, but see, you say that, and I think that it's fair to assume that service time will play a role in that. But, then you have Chris Sale coming out and just being like, I'm never doing this. I'm never challenging. This is not my problem. I don't know anything. I'm just trying to throw these pitches. What I'm more interested in is not, because I agree with you. I do think that pitchers in general are just not going to have this opportunity, which will make it when it does happen, because it doesn't mean it's going to go completely extinct. Like if this becomes super rare, the rare moments where pitchers do challenge and are either right or wrong, that is going to bring it on its own level of excitement
what would you
and potential embarrassment. Yeah.
Pitcher challenges this season, total, all year. What would you set the over-under at?
Well, I do want to get
season.
to just like how many we're going to see, because again, I mean, I'd have to just do the math, right? We know we're having at least 4 challenges a game. There's, 5,000? I can't remember the exact number of games in a major league season. Like you could math it out and probably figure out roughly an assessment, especially if it does become like it's not possible. What I'm more interested in is if from a strategic standpoint, teams decide, oh, we're just never challenging as hitters ever. Or the opposite. Like we're saving all of our challenges for when we're hitting. We're saving all of our challenges for when we're pitching. That is something that I am curious to see how they, and I'm sure this data exists. I wish we had more data specifically about those kinds of things. They have some data about, okay, success rates for, defense versus offense, whatever, but that's something that I would be really interested in by org as well.
You want the weapons. These are weapons, right? They're tools. You want the tools, the weapons to be in the hands of the most capable people. And if I'm, say, the San Francisco Giants, and I have Patrick Bailey back there, who's the best defensive catcher in the game, I feel better about just giving Patrick Bailey all the power and saying, you get all the challenges because we trust your skills. The same is true for the Mets. If I was the Mets, Juan Soto, before the 8th inning, is the only person who can challenge, right? Because no one in the world has a better understanding of the strike zone than Juan Soto, and him getting ahead in a count. Like the value of Juan Soto getting a ball at any point in a count is like probably higher because of the damage that he's able to do after that.
So this is where I want to push back a little bit. And this is where I'm so excited to see. Because on that, yes, that would be your first instinct is, oh man, I can't wait to see how good Juan Soto is at this. And that's true. I'm not saying I'm not looking forward to that from strictly a ball strike discernment, whether he's right or wrong. But from a strategic standpoint, you could say, well, hold on a second. The guys who really need to flip the count in their favor are the ones who are, when they do fall behind the count, are horrible. Like count leverage is such a big part of baseball on both sides. And you could say, well, actually, you know what? This hitter, who the difference between him being up 2-1 or down 2-1 in the count, or down 1-2 in the count, or have a hitter's count in a high leverage situation, is enormous. And so we want to enable that guy to put himself in a hitter's count. Whereas the best hitters in the world are actually still decent with 2 strikes. So, you know what, Juan Soto, you can deal. You're fine. You don't have to worry about this.
Yeah.
So that's another part about it that I've kind of thought about.
I'm on True Media right now. Okay. And I'm looking at the best hitters in the world in hitters counts, just by OPS. I'm just doing very simple, right? Hitters by OPS, hitters counts. 2-0, 3-0, 2-1, 3-1, 1-0. Okay. There are guys, it's most of the best hitters. Okay. The best hitters are the best hitters when they're ahead, and they're the best hitters when they're behind. Ohtani, Corbin Carroll, Cal Raleigh. Number 4, James Wood. Okay. James Wood. When he's ahead in the count, he had a 1686 OPS in a hitter's count. Okay. 1686. Judge, Devers, Harper, Schwarber, Springer. Number 10, Gavin Sheets. Number 11, Taylor Ward. So it's like, you're right. Like if I'm the Padres and I know that Gavin Sheets is a dog when he's in a hitter's count, do I give him the leeway? Like probably it's a little bit more complicated than this,
I don't know. So anyway, that's a part of it too, is how that works. And then that brings us to just the other human element.
Sorry.
Is
Brian Hayes posting a league worst 677 OPS in hitters counts.
That hurts.
That is so low. Okay, sorry. Volpe's 5th to bottom. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
But like the leverage is a big part of it. I speculate, maybe teams will never challenge when they're pitching or never challenge while they're hitting. Well, certain game situations are going to dictate. Nobody is going to finish a game without using all their challenges. Although that is a very funny thing to think about. If a team just somehow goes the whole game without challenging or doesn't use all their challenges, it's impossible. And I think that is where, when we really zoom out and think about all the elements of this that we are going to get to learn, it is very different than the other recent changes that we've had to our sport, most notably the pitch clock. And this is a point I've made before, but it is part of why I'm so excited to just open up this world, which is that we're going to get 4 challenges a game. We might get 5, we might get 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, who knows, however many, if the umpire is having a bad game. These are going to happen. When the pitch clock was introduced, we're like, oh man, all the violation stats are going to be so fun. You look over the last few years, they don't happen every game. Not even close. You don't even notice them, right? And the leverage is so different. And so in this case, we're just going to be adding more data every single game because we know these challenges are going to happen. Now, sometimes they're going to be happening in blowouts because we might as well use them, and it's not as interesting. That data isn't as compelling. But I do still think that the politics of who's allowed to use them is still going to come into play for basically every game. And because of that, you're also going to have situations where hitters or pitchers or someone's challenging that isn't supposed to, or that got it wrong in a bad spot and left their best player without a challenge in an even bigger spot later in the game. And this is just another thing that we as reporters get to ask players about sometimes in the heat of the moment. And you can imagine that some of these situations will arise that could potentially produce some internal conflict, which is, of course, not what the league wants or what the goal of any of this is. But I do think it is an outcome that is going to happen. I do think there's going to be some very real human dynamics, both internally on teams, between players and managers still, in a situation where, hey, why did you grant that guy a challenge? It took him 3.5 seconds. That's absolutely going to happen, where other teams are angry that you even let them, or the opposite, where it's like, oh, they don't grant the challenge because you didn't do it fast enough. And you say, what do you mean? I tapped my head right away. Like, all of that is really where the kinks are going to be worked out. But once we kind of get the hang of it, I do think there's just going to be a lot of data to be processed and understood and enjoyed, and I look forward to all of that.
Let's take a break, and when we get back, it will be Jordan and Garrett Stubbs talking about the ABS system from the perspective of someone who gets paid to play baseball.
Welcome back to Baseball Barbacast. I'm now very excited to be joined by a good friend of the program. It's Garrett Stubbs of the Philadelphia Phillies. Garrett, welcome back to the show. I know you're enjoying some Florida warmth. I've got a lot more snow coming down here in Northeast Ohio, but I'm not complaining because the magic of the internet has brought us together to create podcast magic. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's windy out here. The lettuce is moving.
Do you ever feel like, as a catcher, your hair does not get enough shine because of how often you have to?
I try to take the mask off as much as possible to give it some air, let it breathe a little bit.
That's good. So, Garrett, your qualifications as a catcher are a big part of why we wanted to have you join the show today, because this is our ABS special episode. And when I was in Arizona, I was talking to catchers all week long, and we wanted to definitely get the player perspective. And I think the catchers are definitely the people to talk to first. And because you in particular had extensive experience with the ABS challenge system last year in AAA, I believe you started an nice 69 games behind the plate in Lehigh Valley, over 300 plate appearances. So you lived this. You understand what this system is all about. But let's start there, because as someone who also has ample big league time and are back in big league spring training, preparing for another season with the Phillies, do you feel like the AAA experience last year will be at all representative of what we are going to have at the major league level this year? Big picture, what do you think are going to be similar and what do you think is going to be different? And then we'll get into some specifics.
Yeah, I think it'll be very similar. I can't imagine the difference in the ABS as far as how it performed in AAA being different than the big leagues. The big leagues will be different because of the ABS, no doubt. You can go through a Rolodex of different situations where you wish you could use ABS last season or even season previous to last. It's the same thing with replay, right? We were game without replay before, and now we have replay, and you wish that you had it previously in the seasons before replay existed. So the league will definitely change. There'll be some adjustments that need to be made by players. I think the umpires probably won't like it very much, but there'll also be plenty of times where umpires get the call right and we think that it's wrong and challenge it, and they end up being right. So they can hang their hat on those ones too.
Well, and that's what's so cool. And we kind of reviewed some of this at the start of the episode. The stats might kind of shock some people. Like when this was introduced and you think like, oh, finally we can fix all these terrible calls. And then you go and you look and the challenge success rate is only a little over 50%. I believe it's higher specifically when catchers are challenging it, and we can get into why that might be versus when hitters and pitchers are challenging it. But I think that the one other thing I wanted to get at with my first question is, like, what I'm curious about is, from a strategic standpoint, how seriously did you guys take it at the AAA level in terms of who was allowed to challenge, how seriously you were trying to save them for the end of the game? Because obviously in the minor leagues, you do want to win, but the stakes are a little bit different than in the major leagues, where this is a very serious decision in terms of when you're going to do these, because winning and losing major league games is the whole point, and that's different than AAA. So how do you think that dynamic? And I'm curious how seriously you guys took it in AAA.
Yeah, I mean, we did take it seriously. You're right about the whole winning piece of it. I was lucky to be on a team last year that did care about winning, and we did win a lot of games. I think we had the best record, or maybe the second best record in all of AAA. And so we took that to heart, and we did come up with strategies on not necessarily who could challenge throughout the entire game, but kind of when you could challenge when certain situations dictated a different strategy during the game. So for us, after the seventh inning, if we were winning the game, as a hitter, you could not challenge. After the seventh inning, if we were winning, hitters could not challenge anymore. Those were left to either the pitcher or the catcher. Now, we never implemented anything where the pitcher couldn't challenge or anything like that. But if I were to make a managerial decision, that would be one that I would make. And that's not because you want to take any sort of power out of a pitcher's hands, except for in this situation, it is hard for pitchers to dictate the zone from 60 feet, 6 inches away versus the hitter who's standing right there at the plate, deciding balls and strikes in their head throughout the at bat, and the catcher obviously getting a bird's eye view, real easy view from behind the plate. But as far as getting them right and wrong, yeah, as a catcher, it's definitely probably the best place to be. But at the same time, you will start to see a lot of catchers get them and hitters get them wrong because as a player, it's not like you're sitting there and first and foremost thinking balls and strikes. You're also trying to either hit the ball, catch the ball, frame the ball, think about a runner on first who might steal, call a game. There's so many different factors. So, yeah, you will see plenty of guys get balls and strikes wrong.
A couple other questions about the AAA experience. Something I've been asking a lot of guys is, what was like the most successful challenges that you saw in one game, roughly, right? Because you're going to get two to start the game, but you retain them if you keep getting them right. So statistically, because we know that it's rare that teams are right that often, I can't imagine a team. But was there a game where one ump was just having a tough time and you guys turned over, 9 or 10 or more than that? Like what was the most that you saw?
Yeah, I don't know like an exact number,
Sure.
but yeah, I can think of specific games where it started to get a little out of hand and like somewhat embarrassing. To the point where, I mean, you would never not challenge, right? Out of like trying to offend somebody's feelings as far as the umpires go. But yeah, there were a couple games in particular that I can think of where it started to get egregious and it gets frustrating too because you're trying to do your job and the umpire's trying to do their job too. But at a certain point, it just is like, hey, you need to lock it in here because this matters.
Which in theory, like this is the point because you have an opportunity to fix it. And so there is still, as you kind of point out there, like this weird human dynamic that is still at play there in terms of the back and forth. And I'm sure that the relationship between the umps and the catchers is a big part of that, which is really interesting. The other thing that I kind of want to get at too as we move towards like projecting how this is going to work is something that I've found interesting is when we talk about this and we say, oh, well, this is going to eliminate framing entirely. And I'm curious about your experience with that perspective, because I've also heard some theories that you could, in some cases, see the opposite, where because some hitters, again, you have to challenge really quickly. If you're a hitter, you only have a couple seconds. But I've heard some hitters say, like, the catcher's frame can impact how likely I think that it is a strike. Not just the ump. We always think about it from the umpire's perspective. Did you see that dynamic ever come into play where, a ball maybe isn't a strike, but because the catcher framed it, the hitter looks back and thinks it looks pretty good, maybe or reverse, and they think, oh, well, maybe I should or shouldn't challenge that. Did that really come into play?
I don't think that catcher framing is leaving the game. At the end of the day, the umpire is still making a call, and then somebody has to challenge if they feel like the call is wrong. And if the call is close, you might not challenge. Like there's plenty of, as a hitter or a catcher, where I felt like it was close enough that it wasn't worth the challenge. And maybe the catcher gets away with framing one, or I got away in the catcher with framing one. I also, this is like part of the game that people are going to maybe have some back and forth with umpires is there'll be pitches that are close, right? And you think it's, say you're hitting and you think it was a ball and the umpire calls it a strike. And you're like, ooh, you don't have that outside? And they're like, no, I had it right there on the corner. You're like, I think that was on outside. And the umpire's response will be, well, then challenge it. And that can be frustrating as a player because the point of the challenge system is not to challenge. It is to hold, umpires to account and be able to, make and stay focused on making those right calls. So there is some frustration and back and forth. And I heard that so many times last year on, well, then challenge it. And it's like, God, because you don't want to challenge in certain situations, especially when it's, such a fine line between ball and strike sometimes where it doesn't feel worth it.
And also that back and forth is the amount of time it takes to you have to
can't
decide,
challenge
right?
it at that point.
It's really more about the next time. They're basically saying like, okay, if you don't think that that's a strike, the
Yeah.
next time I call that, go ahead and see, and we'll
Yeah.
find out who's correct here.
Yeah, exactly. And the timing of challenging too, like there will be some umpires that have a little bit more leeway on how much time you have and get a better, there's like a little bit more feel to it. Then there's other umpires that if you even react and then challenge, it's too late. If you look at your own dugout for even a half a second and then challenge, too late. So you kind of got to get a feel for the umpire. And I've noticed that, if they feel like they maybe did get it wrong, then maybe a quicker trigger. If they feel like they did get it right and you challenge even later on, they'll be like, all right, you can challenge, and they'll let you challenge because they were so confident that they had it right. So
That
there's some back
yeah.
and forth, and we'll see how it pans out.
And that's the thing is it's like, yes, in some respects, this is taking a human element out, and it's also adding another human
Adds one.
element.
Yeah, it will add one.
And that's the other part that I'm really excited about, having seen it even in a much lower stakes setting in like the Arizona Fall League. I guess we saw it in the All-Star game last year too. Did you sense that it was something that fans were enjoying, that in certain games, in certain situations, or did it take away from maybe those late inning high stakes moments? Because I can remember even last spring training seeing some like at the ends of some innings, even earlier in the games, where it was both like kind of funny, but like confusing and like kind of a weird rhythm thing, which I know people were worried about with the pitch clock. But I think because basically everyone adjusted to that so quickly, we had much fewer of those moments of violations. In this case, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for big moments at the ends of innings or the ends of games to be challenged. Did you have any situations like that where it felt like it interrupted the flow of the game or the fan experience?
I mean, look, sure, at times maybe there's nothing that comes to like mind where I was like, oh yeah, I remember this one time where there was the end of an inning or the end of a game and they challenged it. But sure, that might happen. At the end of the day, you want to get the call right no matter what. Whether it was a big moment and it got taken away, well, it shouldn't have been there in the to begin with. So whether it got taken away or not, whatever. It happens with replay. It happens in tennis with the line calls or whatever, inbounds, out of bounds. So yeah, I mean, maybe that will happen. I don't think that that's like some sort of issue that needs to be addressed or that it will take away from the drama of the game. There will also be the fan experience where you'll hear people from the stands yell challenge it, like they want to see it up on the board because they feel like it's a ball or a strike. And there'll be times where whatever side, whether it's catcher or hitter, that challenge it and get it right, and fans love it. Like they cheer, they like it, and so, and then there's also times where you get it wrong as a player and you'll get booed. So that's just an additional element for fans to enjoy, and it's super quick. Like it does
Yeah.
not delay the game at all. So even if it was a high stakes moment, umpire gets it wrong, gets challenged, gets overturned, it happens within, I mean, a max of 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Like 10 seconds would be long.
And I know that in the first couple of days of spring training, there have been some much clunkier ones at some of the stadiums that haven't necessarily been used to it.
Yeah.
But in general, my experience with it, watching it, whether it's in the minors, like it is so fast. And I agree. I'm not worried about that. But yeah, you mentioned like when the players get it wrong, again, seeing it in the fall league, I saw a situation where where the players were wrong so often. I heard some fans say like, "Nice call, Blue." Which, like,
Yeah.
you would
No,
never,
they'll start.
you
Yeah,
would
they'll start
never
pumping
hear
up the
that in
umpire.
any situation.
sure.
Like, oh, okay, well now the umpire gets to really kind of show what they have. So
Yeah.
no,
and they will start pumping them up.
sure. Which again, it's like
It's great.
it's which is great because to me, it's like that's another character in the baseball game, which I think is
For
fine.
sure.
Another thing for us to track from a statistical standpoint. So my last question for you here is again thinking more forward and what your experience so far has been in the conversations that you've been having so far in spring training, and particularly with the Phillies, a extremely veteran laden team where there's honestly. It's possible you guys have like the fewest players of any team that have like played with this system. I'm now realizing like I'm just kind of saying that on top of my head, but just knowing how few rookies you guys have had on both sides and just like the veteran personalities involved. So you don't have to reveal the grand strategy for the Phillies and ABS Challenges system this year, but I think what I'm most curious about is How much different have the conversations been this year in terms of the intentionality and the preparation compared to last year, where it was just like, all right, there's this fun thing we're testing, let's see how it goes? How seriously have you guys been taking it, even in the first couple days? And how do you kind of see those conversations evolving? And I imagine, as someone who has experienced that, you're a big part of those conversations.
Yeah, strategically, we've had one meeting about it, and there's no like set in stone strategy. I spoke about my experience during the meeting and how I felt it could affect hitters and pitchers and different ways to use it and how early in the game. And if you lose a challenge early in the game, the umpires zone, does maybe they don't change on purpose, but they're definitely more comfortable back there, not no, like knowing that there's not two challenges out there. So strategically, we talked about it a little bit, but there's no set in stone strategy. I think that that'll kind of develop over time. And then as far as the veteranness, yeah, I'm just a month shy of 5 years, and I'm like one of the least service time guys on our team, full of all 10-year plus guys. I mean, Trey's got 9.5 or something. So, he's on the lower side, not being above 10.
Right.
So yeah, there's definitely a lot of vets and guys who have used the ABS except for last spring training. And so we've been in the cage and like practiced per se on what it looks like when your zone is up and where pitches cross, like using traject and different mechanisms to see and track pitches and where they cross the zone. So we've done that a little bit, and I think the best way to do it, honestly, is just play games. So spring training will be huge for that. We'll get in games. We'll start to realize what is and isn't a strike in that specific zone because it is different uh, based off of what the called zone is and then now what the zone is. You look at the called zone, it's more of like an oval shape within that rectangle, but now it's the entire rectangle or square or whatever. So it is a little bit different zone, and we'll have to just make an adjustment like we did with the clock and other things. And so hopefully it makes the game better. I think our game, as far as the whole, is moving in the right direction. We're, the fan base across the league is growing, and baseball is an incredible sport to watch. And coming with the WBC in a week is just another piece that's going to be added to the fan experience and as a whole for our game. And it's awesome to see, and I think people are really enjoying it.
Yeah, no, well said. Yeah, that's the one thing that, if Justin Crawford, I normally it's like, hey, don't let the rookie challenge. Well, that's the one guy who just played an entire season with the
No doubt.
system. So it's we will see how that comes into play.
Yeah, I think there will be definitely a piece of that. Like you're
Sure.
gonna have to make sure you know your role, right? If I'm hitting ninth and Schwartz is hitting behind me, I'm not gonna use a challenge with one out, bases loaded when Schwartz is the next batter. Not gonna happen. It better be way out of the zone.
I know. I was gonna say, I'm just imagining a version like that where you're just like that internal struggle of like, I can't use it, like it looks so obvious.
Yeah, no doubt that will happen. It will happen.
We will see. And again, so many things that we can't even foresee with this, but you are someone that has at least lived it a little bit. So Garrett Stubbs, as always, thank you for the perspective. We look forward to seeing. I hope you do get a chance to win a challenge in the major leagues this year, whether as a catcher, as a hitter. I hope you get that opportunity, regardless of your service time, sir.
Yeah,
I think you.
Me too. Me too.
I think you've earned it. Garrett Stubbs, one of our favorites. Thank you so much for joining Baseball Barbacast, my friend.
And welcome back to Baseball Barbacast. Enough about our abs. Let's go around the league. Numerous reports indicating over the weekend that Rhys Hoskins, friend of the program, signed a minor league deal with the Cleveland Guardians. This news was not reported by anybody getting scoops. This was reported by, I believe, Cleveland Guardians reporters walking into the locker room and saying, hey, ain't that Rhys Hoskins? This is similar to Jordan breaking the Will Brennan news because he recognized Will Brennan in the Giants locker room. This is a little different. Rhys Hoskins, a little bit more notable. However, maybe not notable enough, as Mr. Hoskins only gets a minor league deal. He will receive $1.5 million if he makes the team out of camp. It is an interesting fit. Jordan, what do you make of Rhys having to settle for this type of situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was a natural fit. Cleveland, in their quest to not change anything about their offense, which ranked 28th in OPS last year, despite winning the division, they were like, no, we got young guys, we got young guys, we got young guys. These kids got to play. These are ones that are already in the majors, in the infield and the outfield. Guys like, Arias and Rocchio in the infield. Guys who came up last year like Kafis, DeLauder in the postseason. They've got a bunch of dudes at the upper levels, and then there's even more coming, right? We know Travis Pizzana is probably going to show up at some point. Juan Brito, another guy who's had success at the upper levels. And so they've just kept saying, George Valera, another one who debuted last year. So there's a lot of guys that want to give playing time, but Guardians fans rightfully saying, well, can we get someone that like actually definitely knows how to hit, preferably right-handed? Outfield made a little bit more sense because that is where they were lacking particular right-handed power, but they really just don't have a lot of right-handed hitters. Of course, Ramirez, a switch hitter. Gabby Arias is not a good hitter, but he's a shortstop. Austin Hedges is obviously not there to hit. And so I was wondering if it was going to be another reunion with Lane Thomas, bringing in Austin Hayes. Instead, they get a veteran righty bat in Rhys Hoskins. As for you say, well, what is Rhys Hoskins settling for this for? And even if you look at it as a major league deal for $1.5 million, which is very well what this is going to be, it's important to kind of remember how his season went last year, right? He was off to a damn good start. Milwaukee came into Cleveland in May, and Rhys was hitting like 280 with not as much pop as we're used to seeing. But remember, this is a guy that was coming off of a serious injury, before, and him even being with Milwaukee to begin with was an interesting kind of outcome. He was hitting well. He had a thumb sprain, I believe, in July that put him on the IL. And when he came back, Andrew Vaughn was the best hitter in the world, and he was still not really good, right? So he barely played in September, did not play in the postseason. So Rhys was just a complete non-factor in the second half of last season. He is a right-handed hitting first base DH who's not offering much defensive value or speed or defense or anything. So this is already, and he's about to turn 33. So this is not a particularly sexy free agent profile. I was not expecting him to cash in a big way. And I think he ultimately settled for the opportunity that is going to, this late in camp, that is going to give him the best path to playing time on a team that should still be pretty good. And I think that's, I haven't obviously talked to Rhys yet, but that would be my guess as to why he ended up there. And, at some point for these free agents, you probably do want to just get on a team and figure it out later. And I have to imagine Cleveland gives him a pretty clear opportunity to make the team as maybe the short side of a platoon, right-handed DH to get a good number of at-bats. So I like the fit. I'm obviously excited to see him in Cleveland. I hope he makes the team. But I think just the fact that he was so injured and just so not relevant for the second half of last season made it a little bit difficult for teams to invest in him too heavily.
I do think, though, it is worth remembering that the Milwaukee Brewers, the team that won the most games in baseball, through the first 2 months of the season, Rhys Hoskins was their best hitter. Now, the Brewers did not start really clicking until halfway through the season when they went on that big winning streak. They had 2 enormous winning streaks. But still, like, Rhys Hoskins was almost 100 points of OPS better than the second best hitter on the team through the end of May, right? This is still a valuable bat if he gets regular plate appearances. I'll be very curious to see if he gets that in Cleveland. The Chicago Cubs signed Michael Conforto.
Yeah, cool. They sure did. Both of these guys, by the way, Boris clients. We will not be doing the SCOBO for these, although I think you can kind of guess where we would grade it. But Michael Conforto, minor league deal with Chicago. The Cubs roster fit is really about they don't really have any left-handed hitters on the bench. Moises Ballesteros is a very exciting rookie hitter who projects to be kind of the strong side of the DH platoon with new signing Tyler Austin. Moises Ballesteros was dealing with a lot of travel issues getting to spring training. I believe he just got there yesterday or the day before. He's also a very young player that you can imagine if they don't see him completely ready to be on the team opening day, they would need another left-handed hitter, and Michael Conforto, as horrible as he was for most of last season, I think at least fits in that regard because, of course, they traded away Owen Casey. That was a big part. They don't have Kyle Tucker anymore, so there is a little bit of a roster imbalance there. Is Conforto definitely going to make the team? I think it's a lot less likely he's on the team than Rhys Hoskins is on the Guardians, but man, like for both of those guys really, but particularly for Conforto, who still got a pretty big deal from a smart team last year in the Dodgers, this is it seems that the league has looked at it and be like, all right, you really got to prove it back before we invest heavily again.
It got $17 million last year and was not on the playoff roster.
He was one of the worst.
Kind of an underrated part. If you want to make like the anti-Dodgers argument, the idea that they could effectively take $17 million and just burn it by giving it to non-factor Michael Conforto,
dude, we talked about it. They flushed however much money down the toilet with Kirby Yates, and Tanner Scott was horrible. I know he's still on the team and could still be good, but yeah, even the teams that we laud for knowing what they're doing are making terrible decisions quite frequently.
Sure,
but that's baseball.
Injuries. Let's just fly through these because they suck. Pablo Lopez needs Tommy John. It has been an unfortunate couple of years. A lot of injuries for Pablo Lopez. One of the best talkers in the game. Thoughtful dude, smart guy. This is a huge bummer. He is owed $22 million over the next 2 years. Kind of an untradeable asset for the Twins now. Probably should have traded him last summer. He is now effectively a non-factor for the Twins moving forward, at least until next season. We also had Joe Ryan getting scratched with back tightness. That doesn't seem to be a big deal. He is slated to be in the rotation for Team USA in the World Baseball Classic, so that is something just to keep an eye on. And then in Baltimore, Jordan Westberg, infielder, has a partially torn UCL. The Orioles were being weird about injuries. They're weird about injuries in general. With their manager, Craig Albernes, being asked about his condition, he said he is physically unable to play. Someone was then like, is it oblique or elbow? And he said he is physically unable to play. It's like, all right. Jordan Westberg will not be getting Tommy John surgery. As Jordan and I have said many times, the list of players to have UCL tears and not need Tommy John surgery is very, 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 very small. It is a better chance if you're a position player than a pitcher. That is for sure. But simply just rehab. And look, these doctors know better than two dummies on a podcast. But just the way that this always works, going to try to rehab the partially torn ligament for a couple months, and then you end up needing TJ, and then you miss the whole year anyway. So this literally happened with the Orioles and Felix Bautista, didn't it?
Yeah, listen, it's completely different for position players. Although I will say, for someone that is expected to just like be the third baseman for the next several years, I do think throwing is like not a small part of what his job is going to be. So from that standpoint, I'm a little bit worried. Either way, it doesn't shock me that position players decide, no, I'm not going full TJ. But it's a huge deal. They're already going to be missing Jackson Holliday for the start of the season because of his hamate injury. They have added some interesting depth. The Blaze Alexander trade now looks way better and way more sensible. Not that they knew that this was happening. At least I don't think they did when they made that trade. They just signed Tyro Estrada to a minor league deal. They've added a few other guys. This is where Jeremiah Jackson could become important if he can still play the infield. So they have some options, but I will say that like very quickly oh my God, this could be the best lineup in baseball when they sign Pete is like, well, all right, let's relax because we are now very quickly looking at a group that does not look quite as formidable after the top few. So I still a lot of good hitters on this team, but yeah.
Pete Yard in spring training. So
this is not a commentary on Pete. You know, I'm all in. I think Pete.
Sure.
Thank goodness they signed him, right? I mean, this is, and I'm glad you mentioned that because
this is why
this is part of why. This is why you signed Pete Alonso, because guess what? I'm not worried about Pete Alonso ever being. He's never going to be hurt. He's going to play every game. He's going to hit you 35 home runs. He's going to drive in 100. Like it's
going to play bad defense at first base. He's going to be nice to be around.
Exactly. And honestly, to a degree, Taylor Ward kind of gives you the same kind of thing. And so that's why you go out and get those guys, because weird stuff happens, especially when you're the Orioles. And to Craig Albernes, let me just say this. Dude, if you want to be vague, just go coach hockey. You don't have to say anything in hockey. You just say, oh, lower body, upper body. What's the difference? Don't ask any more questions. But in baseball, we generally like to know what's going on.
We would like to know what's going on. And you know why? Because the opponents probably won't try and injure the player in the area of problem.
Right. That's or like in the NBA when a guy has a screwed up wrist and they just keep banging it. That's true. Not as much of an issue in baseball. I mentioned Blaze Alexander. Kobe Mayo, if you're going to be a good major leaguer,
This is it.
here's your chance, bro.
This is it.
Let's see it. Let's see it. There were some promising signs last year. I know some people are way out on Kobe Mayo being a good big leaguer, but I don't know. He's talented. We will see him get that opportunity. All right, couple other topics before we say goodbye. Let's go to the college baseball world. Let's just talk about a couple of the most notable performances 2 weeks into college baseball. One of which I know caught your attention, and then one of which is more relevant to the Major League Baseball fan in 2026. Sorry.
Let's talk about the 2026 first overall pick and maybe the 2027 first overall pick.
Sure.
I mean, we'll start with this
Who do you want to start with?
Rock Chalowski.
Okay.
A name that we have said on the show already, a name that some of you may already know, shortstop at the University of California, Los Angeles, better known as UCLA. Already has 6 home runs on the season. The college baseball season is like a week and a half old. He is the projected number 1 pick. He is amazing. And I love it when players with this amount of hype come out of the gate and are just electric immediately. And it's not like over this past weekend, Jordan, Rock Chalowski was not playing against the, Kansas Institute for Farming and Mining. Like, he was going yard off of TCU, who looks like a top 15 team in the country so far this season. So UCLA is incredible. They swept TCU at home. Rock is amazing. He is about as exciting a number 1 pick as we have had entering a season in some time. I know Paul Skeens, by the end of his junior year, had kind of elevated himself to a different echelon, but I'm just saying right now, Rock Chalowski is special and is someone to watch. Anything on Rock?
No, I will see him here in Columbus in a couple weeks. It will be cold and it will be glorious. I can't wait to see if he can hit homers in 35-degree weather.
Dax Whitney is the other name that you need to know about. Dax Whitney is a sophomore right-handed pitcher at Oregon State University. And over the weekend against Baylor, he punched out 17 in 7 innings. This was masterful. Dax Whitney was a top 2 round pick out of high school, valued around that area, out of an Idaho high school in Blackfoot, Idaho, a town of just over 10,000 people. He decides to go to Oregon State, looks awesome last year as a freshman, and seems to have taken yet another step forward. He was like sitting 97 to 99. He had more 100s than 96s. The fastball has preposterous carry. It comes out of a really low arm slot for a really tall guy. So he has extension, but it's almost like souped up Lucas Giolito once he lowered the arm slot. It's like, think about that arm action. But then it is a wipeout slider, and then he has added the changeup seems to have taken a real step forward. That thing looked nasty the other night. Go watch the Dax Whitney highlights. They're on YouTube against Baylor. This is a super exciting pitching prospect who I think, we're over a year and a half away from the 2027 draft. He's looking like a top 5 pick right now, no doubt.
Yeah.
Someone to put into your brain.
Yep, 100%. And it's first few weeks of college baseball is always a little weird just because you have some of these tournaments where you have like top ranked teams playing against each other, and then you just have like Georgia Tech putting up 5 billion runs against bad competition, and you don't really know how to compare any of it. But Dax and Rock are definitely guys to know.
What do we want to call Dax Whitney? Because, he's from Blackfoot, Idaho, which is known as the potato capital of the world. Idaho, stereotypically known for potatoes, and it appears that Blackfoot is the potato place in the potato place, the site of the Idaho Potato Museum. This is according to Wikipedia, the location of the world's largest baked potato and potato chip. So are we calling Dax Whitney the Spud?
I think so. It's unfortunate, right? I mean, usually taters are more associated with home runs and hitters, so it's not really an option for him. So, let's let baseballbarbacast@gmail.com. Let us know. Can we come up with a pitcher potato related nickname for Dax Whitney? Again, plenty of time before
we'll never get a better opportunity.
Our professional baseball world.
Like, I know we've had some big leaguers from Idaho, Harmon Killebrew, whatever. Dax Whitney will probably, when he's all done, be the best pitcher ever born in Idaho. Maybe that's a preposterous thing to say, but like, this is our best chance to mix potatoes and baseball in a nickname. Okay. It is important in life to understand the opportunities you have in front of you. And we have one right now. So email us baseballbarbacast@gmail.com for all your potato related puns.
Kyle Manzardo is our current standard for Idaho baseball, and
but
I know
we
he's
talked
quite
about
proud
this
of it.
last year. He's from a different part of Idaho where it's
Coeur d'Alene and Blackfoot are very different. It's true, I understand. But again, it's like, to me, I just don't want to be. Let's not be picky. I mean, there's only so many players.
Sure, but I mean, he's from, again,
come on now.
He's from the town with the location of the world's largest baked potato.
No, that's great.
What a gift.
I'm just curious about that world's largest baked potato. Is it?
Do they just like keep it
I'll
out?
have to look into more about
it. Seems perishable.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I love
the sour cream on that thing must smell terrible.
Oh my goodness! All right, one more bit of news before we say goodbye. This of the more somber variety. Bill Mazeroski, the Hall of Famer, passing away over the weekend, or I think late last week, at the age of 89. Bill Mazeroski is one of the great. I mean, obviously, you're a Hall of Famer. You're pretty important. But when you had a walk-off home run to win the World Series in Game 7, you're already in your own category. But to me, it is a beautiful thing that Bill Mazeroski, hailed as one of the great defenders in the history of the sport. That is why he's in the Hall of Fame as an 8-time Gold Glover. In fact, you can see behind my left shoulder a great Bill Mazeroski bobblehead where he has all of his Gold Gloves stacked up. But he is known most. Awesome. What would it take to be known for something beyond your 8 Gold Gloves? It's hitting a walk-off home run in Game 7 of the World Series, which is a heck of a resume.
It's the greatest swing in the history of the sport. It, is the only walk-off home run in Game 7 of the World Series. Think about how many people dream of that, how stereotypical that is as a moment, and Bill Mazeroski lived it. He's the only person to have lived it in that way. And you're right. If you go look at Bill Mazeroski's page, he was not a dynamic offensive player. In fact, he has to be the only Hall of Fame hitter to never have an OPS plus over 100. Like,
it's a short list if it is. I mean, I think, there might be some other, glove first infielders who played forever and won a bunch of games. But yeah,
you can pick apart whether or not you should be in the Hall. We're not going to do that. Think about how sick you got to be with the glove at second base to get into the Hall of Fame with those types of offensive stats. Now, it certainly helps. Again, he hit the greatest home run of all time and a play that will live forever in baseball history. Thoughts out to Bill Mazeroski's family. A life well lived, passing away at the age of 89. That is our show for today. Thank you to TJ Brassel and Andrew Hartz for producing. Jordan, thank you for doing this with me. Thank you to the listeners. Thank you to the fans. Thank you to our bosses for putting us back on 3 days a week. Oh, that's how you know, man. Yes. I'm looking outside. I got snow on the ground. I head to Florida on Wednesday evening. One more show before I get out of the snow. But I know baseball's here because I'm talking to you 3 days a week.
Another special guest coming later this week. If you liked our conversation with Scott Pianowski last week, make sure you go sign up for Yahoo Fantasy Baseball. All kinds of fun new features at the Yahoo Fantasy Baseball, just in the world of Yahoo Fantasy. This is the time. Go draft your team. Or maybe wait until, all the injuries are past us. But until then, thank you. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to Andrew Hart, CJ Bradsell, as you said. BaseballBarbacast@gmail.com. We will talk to you again very soon. See you on Wednesday.